Hello and welcome to Fantastic History. I'm Clay.
I'm Sarah.
We're a husband and wife duo who enjoy telling each other about events, people, and mysteries throughout history. Sarah, let me tell you a story.
Oh, great.
The year is 1776.
I'm familiar with it, yeah.
And a very historical event is just about to take place in the British colonies.
Okay.
You may be familiar with it. The British wanted to introduce breadfruit to the West Indies.
Yeah, everybody knows about that.
Of course.
Yeah.
Very
I definitely
important.
know what that is.
So they had discovered breadfruit in Tahiti, and it was a very nutritious food that they thought would grow well in the equally tropic Caribbean.
Okay.
But specifically, they thought it would be a good and cheap food source for slaves.
Great.
Hey, we're talking about the British.
Yeah.
It's gonna come up. The Royal Society spearheaded the project by outfitting a smaller vessel in the Royal Navy called the HMS Bounty for the job.
I've heard of that ship.
Well, you may be familiar with the story. The Bounty was rated as a cutter, a small three-masted warship that did not require to be commanded by a captain because of its size, instead by a lieutenant. And interestingly, since it didn't require a captain as its master and commander, it did not require a detachment of Marines, which was standard on these larger warships. Now, these Marines were there to both protect the captain and maintain authority on the vessel.
So I have a quick question. So lieutenant is like lower than captain?
Yes.
Okay, because I definitely, I know general's at the top and private is at the bottom.
Yeah.
And as far as anything in between, girl, I don't know.
It's all good.
Okay.
But just know, but this is an important detail, which is why I'm mentioning it specifically.
Okay.
So the Bounty was modified, converting the captain's quarters into a greenhouse where 1,000 breadfruit plants would be kept for the journey home. The command of the expedition was given to Lieutenant William Bligh. Now, Bligh was an experienced sailor. He was born in Plymouth.
Oh, like Massachusetts or England?
Oh, I don't know. I think it's England.
You know what? You guys will look it up and you'll know, because if it is Massachusetts, we'll play Neil Diamond here.
So he was born in Plymouth to a family full of naval tradition and had sailed with the famous Captain James Cook.
Oh.
And he was even present during Cook's murder in Hawaii a few years prior.
Awkward.
And that might make an interesting episode later on, but I digress. Bligh's crew was to be comprised of 44 Royal Navy men and 2 civilian botanists. Among the crew was the sailing master John Fryer, the carpenter William Purcell, and master's mate Fletcher Christian. Bligh's instructions were to sail down the Atlantic and go around Cape Horn, which is the tip of South America, and then into the Pacific and right off to Tahiti. Okay. And Tahiti, if you aren't familiar, which I understand, there's so many islands, tiny islands. It is in the South Pacific. It's one of these thousands of islands in the South Pacific, and it's not really off the coast, but it's to the east of Australia and New Zealand, and just in that region of ocean.
Sure.
And then they were going to travel westward through the Indian Ocean and below the Cape of Good Hope, which is the tip of Africa, to re-enter the Atlantic. So their plan was to circumnavigate the Earth
right.
on this trip to get these breadfruit plants.
That sounds fun.
By early October 1787.
Oh, we've jumped ahead quite a bit.
Well, 1776 was chosen because that's around the time they started to plan. They got the idea of this. Plus, it was a good ruse to start off on.
Oh, okay.
But technically, this started in about 1787.
Okay.
The Bounty departed, docking at Deptford in southern London for Spithead in the English Channel, where they were going to wait for their final orders to depart.
Spithead sounds charming.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, love that. Let's go.
But Bligh was anxious. He wanted to head out as quickly as possible because Cape Horn was and is known to be one of the most dangerous sailing routes in the world.
Huh.
High winds, massive waves, icebergs, and other hazards have claimed many ships and lives, which is why the Panama Canal was constructed and is primarily used nowadays.
I gotta say, okay, so this is something, I don't know if I've mentioned it before, but I am awful at geography. Like,
Sure.
just absolutely terrible. And it was at this moment, at my big age, that I found out that South America has parts of it that are cold.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I always imagined it as like the tropical Americas, the rainforests, like...
Well, it certainly does give that impression with the rainforests and everything.
Right.
But I mean, the southern tip is really close to Antarctica.
Guys, I'm really sorry. I am simple.
Hey, this is where you come to learn.
This is fantastic geography.
So Bligh knew that the sooner he could get out of the canal and get on with his trip, the better his chances of getting through the Cape Horn before the weather turned. But the Admiralty was delaying his sailing orders, and the weather was also causing delays. So he was delayed, and every day delayed made the path more dangerous. So much so that he requested permission to travel east if he was unable to pass through the Cape.
Wow.
He was like preparing ahead of time because he knew it was going to
Sure.
be so dangerous. Finally, on December 23rd, after weeks of delay, the Bounty heads to sea. Now that they are finally on the open ocean, it's a good time to talk about the kind of leader that Bligh was on the Bounty. He was a strict commander, right? Obsessed with cleanliness and discipline. But he wasn't a heartless leader. He actually broke tradition by replacing the 4-watch system with a 3-watch system. Now, this allowed the crew to have 8 full hours of rest during the day instead of the typical 4 hours of rest.
Crikey.
And that made for, more uninterrupted sleep and rest. Just easier on the crew, right?
Sure.
But on the other hand, the men were ordered to clean the deck daily with vinegar, and their nails were routinely inspected. And if they had dirty nails, they were disciplined.
That's cuckoo behavior.
He also encouraged cheerfulness and exercise by having music and dancing every night.
I hate him.
It seems that these dance nights were not enjoyed by the crew. In fact, they hated it intensely. There were some tensions on the ship, needless to say, but it wasn't too bad yet. Now is a good time to talk about Fletcher Christian. And as we discussed, Fletcher Christian was one of the crewmen on the Bounty. He was the master's mate, right under Bligh. In fact, Christian and Bligh had sailed together before, and Bligh viewed him kind of as a pupil. In March 1788, Bligh promoted Christian to acting lieutenant on the Bounty, and I believe this was to give Christian a boost in his sailing career for when he returned to Britain. It's like saying, hey, this guy is a stand-up guy. He knows what he's up to. I'd give him a promotion on this important trip. When you get back to Britain, you'll have this little gold star on your resume and go on to do better things. So it was kind of a real solid that he did for Christian. Their relationship seemed quite good at this point, but this would change.
Sure.
On April 2nd, the Bounty had reached Cape Horn, but was met with stormy weather, which was worse than Bligh had ever seen before. The high winds continued to push the Bounty back every attempt they tried to push forward.
Dude.
So finally on April 17th, remember they had arrived on the 2nd. On April 17th, Bligh admitted defeat and ordered his exhausted crew to abandon Cape Horn and sail for fairer seas through the Cape of Good Hope.
Yikes.
They would anchor in Africa for 5 weeks as the crew recovered and the ship was repaired. And then they departed on July 1st and headed across the Indian Ocean, where they next landed at Adventure Bay.
Oh, fun.
In Tasmania.
Oh my God. Is it a water park?
No.
Oh.
I don't think so.
Okay.
But it might be now.
It sounds like a water park.
It really does. While recovering and replenishing their supplies, the carpenter, William Purcell, had a run-in with Bligh. Apparently, Bligh had a problem with how Purcell was cutting wood.
Oh my God. Oh boy.
It's like, hey, what do you think you're doing? You're doing it wrong. Let me show you how a real man does it. Something like that. Mm-hmm. And Purcell had choice words for his lieutenant.
Good.
Over this matter. Bligh threatened his rations, which seemed to bring the altercation to an end, but there was lingering disrespect on which a proper vessel would have immediately resulted in, disciplinary action, probably being thrown in the brig or something like that. But, and this is important, as we talked about before, Bligh's authority on the ship was not supported by those Marines.
Oh.
His authority was supported only by the agreement of all the men on the ship to listen to him.
Scout's honor, basically.
Basically, yes.
Oh, dear.
So he was kind of on his own.
I'm sorry. If I'm just like trusting that people are going to be nice to me because they said so, I'm not making them clean their nails and dance every night. Like, what are we talking about here, guy?
You got to think he was like, this is going to make everyone very happy to dance.
Oh, my God.
Every night.
Oh.
If he came down too hard and upset the harmony on the ship, he could face a mutiny.
Sure.
So, because of that, Purcell's insolence was left unchecked.
Ooh, that is also a good way to get a mutiny going, bud.
Yeah, it's a delicate thing, right? You gotta know how hard to come down, and it's tricky.
Yeah.
But this clash marked a line in the sand where the tension between Bligh and his crew was starting to become overt. But finally, on October 26, 1788, the Bounty landed at Tahiti, over a year after first departing. Bligh met with the king of Tahiti and presented him with gifts, as well as name-dropping his previous captain, James Cook, who the king had once had a good relationship with. As the crew was only there to exchange for breadfruits, they were warmly welcomed, and this is where the crew would remain for the next 5 months.
Oh, girl, I hope y'all like breadfruit.
Now, this is where the discord between Bligh and his crew really elevates.
When they're not even on the boat anymore?
Well, I think we'll get to that, but they're on the island for 5 months. And Tahiti is a really beautiful place.
Sure.
And after a year at sea, the men were really taken by this beautiful weather, the calm island lifestyle, and most importantly, the beautiful women.
Well, yeah.
18 of the crew formed intimate relationships with the Tahitian women, and one of them was Christian.
Oh.
He formed a close romantic relationship with a woman named Moatua. Life on Tahiti was paradise, but not for Bligh. He was infuriated by his distracted and lazy crew.
What are they supposed to be doing?
They're supposed to be preparing and cultivating the plants to be, put on the ship later. But his crew is like completely like, you can just see it in your head.
Yeah.
How this plays out.
It's a Looney Tunes in my head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't really blame them.
No.
I mean, I'm sure it's like beautiful and peaceful and so much better than being on that awful ship.
Which smells so strongly of vinegar, by the way.
Yeah, but you got to also consider Bligh. He's got a job to do. He's got to have a firm hand to make sure that he gets the job done, because this is like what he's supposed to be doing.
Sure.
And the guys are like kind of lazing out a little bit and not really taking it seriously. So he's got to figure out a way to regain control without just driving them away. It's a tricky situation.
See,
you could
that's
say.
why I was terrible as a supervisor. Like, I am terrible as a boss. Because if somebody's like, do you want to just like hang out? I'm always going to say yes. Like, we're in Tahiti, babe. Like, give me the coconut drinks. Like, give me some sunscreen. We good.
Yeah. Well, he tried. He tried to keep the men disciplined by having them sleep on the boat. But it was clear that his authority was slipping. He even resorted to flogging men whose carelessness was resulting in like damage and losses to the material goods that they were dealing with.
When you're that outnumbered, I just feel like that's probably not the move.
It's extreme,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
On December 5th, 3 men deserted, and they took guns and ammunition with them.
Uh-oh.
They were Charles Churchill, John Millward, and William Muspratt. Muspratt himself had been recently flogged, which may have led to their attempt to escape.
Yeah.
But 3 weeks later, they were found, returned, and again flogged.
Oh, God. I'm glad that Bly is dead.
They're all dead, to be perfectly honest with you.
Well, yeah. I'm just glad that he, in particular, is dead, because he sounds like a real piece of shit.
I don't know, man. Well, let's just keep going.
Sure.
Finally, at the beginning of April, their work was completed. Over 1,000 breadfruit plants now filled the makeshift greenhouse, and the men were preparing to head back to a life at sea. And they did not like it.
No kidding?
They had become smitten with Tahiti, and some of them had even gotten the traditional tattoos on their bodies. And chief among them was Fletcher Christian.
Sure.
He had gone from one of Bly's trusted officers and friends to being distant and aloof.
Yeah.
Bly seemed to lay into him especially hard because of this.
Of course.
And Christian, wanting to stay in Tahiti with Mauta, now viewed Bly with fresh and vigorous hostility.
Mm-hmm.
Nevertheless, the crew said goodbye to Tahiti and headed out to sea. But the crew had changed, becoming more depressed and brooding. And Bly had also changed, becoming more irritable, impatient, and paranoid, which is pretty reasonable considering the situation you have on your hands.
Mm-hmm.
Christian continued to be a target of Bly's rage, and on April 27th, Christian appeared to be at his wits' end when Bly accused him of stealing his private stash of coconuts.
Okay.
The entire crew's food and rum rations were reduced as a result, and Christian is recorded as screaming to Bly, "I have been in hell for weeks with you."
Oh my God.
So he's crashing out hard.
He's had it.
Yeah.
That's a good line.
What?
That's a good line.
Oh yeah. That's why it was recorded.
That makes sense.
I gotta write this down.
Everybody was like whipping out them quills. Boy, they're like, oh, this is fire.
This is fire. The following morning, April 28th, Bly was awoken in his quarters by Christian and 2 other men.
Uh-oh.
They had muskets,
Uh-oh.
and the guns were trained on Bly.
Yeah.
It was a mutiny.
Yay!
Christian had conversed with the others and decided to take control of the ship, and that the majority of the crew would support him. They took the ship's supply of guns and armed themselves before making their way to Bly. His hands were tied, and he was told to keep quiet, but he did scream for help. And the commotion woke up Fryer, but he couldn't do anything.
Sure.
Bly was taken to the deck, where there was complete pandemonium. Anyone was sure who all were involved in the mutiny and who were just going crazy.
Sure.
But the mutiny had succeeded. But now what was Christian going to do with Bly?
Toss his ass overboard.
Make him walk the plank?
No, just toss him.
Just toss him?
Yeah, don't even give him the chance for like a last words or whatever. You don't want Peter Pan swooping in and like they're standing there like no splash, no splash.
Sure.
You know.
You just want to Jazzy Jeff him right off that ship.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then turn around, go back to Tahiti. Problem solved.
Well, luckily that you were not on this ship.
Oh.
It seems that Christian, despite living in hell for these past 3 weeks, was not a murderer.
Huh.
He ordered Bly and all who were loyal to him to get onto the ship's largest boat, a 23-foot launch. But there were too many loyalists.
Ew. What?
There were too many that were loyal to Bly. 19 men were loaded onto the boat and given some supplies, including a compass, a quadrant, which is a navigational tool, the captain's journal, 4 cutlasses, and about 5 days of food and water.
Uh-oh.
Some of the loyalists were forced to stay on the ship, 1, because there was not enough room left on the launch, and 2, because Christian viewed their skills as necessary.
Okay.
And Bly told them that if he was to ever reach England, that he would ensure that they were done justice. And that with that, the launch was released, and Bly's crew vanished to an uncertain fate on the open waves.
Are you serious?
Now with the Bounty under Christian's control, the first order was to, of course, throw those damn breadfruit plants overboard.
Hell yeah.
So that was done. But there was, of course, the problem of when the Bounty didn't return to Britain, the Admiralty would come looking for them.
Sure.
And the first place they were going to look was, of course, Tahiti. So they headed to a small island about 450 nautical miles south of Tahiti called Tubai. I think that's how it's pronounced. Tubai? Anyway, this island would be a pretty good place to hold up as it was completely surrounded, or nearly completely surrounded, by a reef.
Oh.
But the problem is that it was inhabited, and the natives were not kind to intruders.
Sure.
When they first arrived, they were attacked by several canoes full of warriors.
Sure.
Whatever.
Yeah.
The mutineers fought them off with their guns, but they determined that if they were going to survive on the island, that they needed some help. So they returned to Tahiti and convinced the chiefs that Christian did, convinced the chiefs that he and Captain Hook,
Oh, tick tock, tick tock.
that he and Captain Cook, because we're currently reading Peter Pan to our son.
Yeah.
That he and Captain Cook were founding a new settlement on another island, and they needed some livestock, resources, and laborers. But if you remember, Cook had died 10 years ago.
Uh-huh.
So Fletcher was lying.
Sure.
The chiefs believed him, and they returned to Tubai with 30 Tahitian men and women to help them. But surviving on this island proved impossible. The clashes with the native population proved too much. And after a battle which saw 66 natives killed, the mutineers decided that they had to leave. Christian called a vote to decide what to do, and 8 men chose to stay with Christian. But the rest chose to return to Tahiti and just take their chances.
Wow.
When they returned to Tahiti, the mood was sour because in between their visits, a British ship had stopped by.
Uh-oh.
And they had learned that Captain Cook had been killed nearly a decade ago.
Oops.
They're like, you got some explaining to do, sir. However, those mutineers that wanted to stay, they were allowed to stay. But Christian had one more deception up his sleeve.
Oh, dear.
He invited some Tahitians, mostly women, on board the Bounty for a social party, a gathering or something. And while everybody was enjoying the party, he cut the anchor and sailed away.
Great.
Yeah.
Listen, I still don't like Bly.
Not a nice guy.
But this is not going well.
No, he's not a nice guy.
Can't really root for him.
The Bounty left Tahiti on September 22nd, 1789, sailing west for a safe island where they wouldn't be found. And Christian decided to settle on Pitcairn Island, which was known about by the British but not well recorded. After months of searching, they found it on January 15th and settled on the uninhabited island. They stripped the Bounty of anything that they could and then set it on fire.
Whoa.
Effectively marooning themselves.
Sure.
Right? While the island itself was paradise, the people that they were with made it a nightmare. There was constant infighting and rivalries, typically between the Tahitians and the Europeans. This went on for years.
Yeah.
And resulted in many murders.
Dude, that's so fucked up. They just kidnapped those ladies.
And men.
Oh.
Men and women.
Okay.
But you know why they kidnapped the women.
Sure.
Yeah.
Dude.
Christian himself is believed to have either been murdered in one of these conflicts or died of suicide.
I'm honestly fine with that.
But not before he and Mautoa had 3 children. And by 1794, only 4 men remained.
Whoa.
Now, let me be clear. 4 men and the women.
Oh, okay.
But they were all the mutineers.
Oh.
Edward Young and John Adams. Not the same one.
Oh my God.
I know him.
Yeah, I don't think he had it in him.
Edward Young and John Adams tried to keep peace and order, but Matthew Quintal and William McCoy became disruptive drunks. They had found a way to make an alcoholic drink.
Sure.
On the island.
Just let it ferment, man.
I guess you can do it with anything.
Yeah.
This resulted in McCoy committing suicide.
Oh, God.
And Quintal being murdered after threatening the remaining population.
Uh-oh.
But after this, the inhabitants of Pitcairn Island finally found peace. After all but 1 man was dead.
Isn't that crazy? No, it's not actually. That makes a lot of sense.
Well, actually, there were 2 men, but Young would die of asthma not long after, and Adams would become the patriarch of the island for many, many years.
That's so wild.
And he was like the leader protecting the growing population of the island, and they were discovered by the British in 1814.
Oh, wow. Took a while.
And the captains were like, oh my God. But Britain let them be.
Yeah.
They're just like, do what you're going to do. And they just kind of lived for a long time, and people would come and visit them. The British vessels would come and visit and just hear stories from like John Adams himself and Christian's children and everybody. And so that's an interesting conclusion to that part of the story.
It's bizarre.
But as you recall, there were the mutineers who stayed behind on Tahiti. Mm-hmm. They didn't fare all that well either.
I mean, which is probably good, considering.
Well, maybe. Some of these men were the ones who had said, who were loyal to Bligh.
Oh, sure.
So they weren't even like mutineers.
They didn't even want to be part of this in the first place.
No, not at all. Some of them fell into drunken desolation and murder, while others integrated peacefully into the Tahitian culture.
I mean, imagine being trapped. Like, I'm sure some of these people had like wives and kids back home.
Yeah.
You're never seeing them again. Like, there is no hope. That's crazy.
But their island adventure came to an end on March 23rd, 1791.
Oh, girl, I was wrong.
When the HMS Pandora rolled up.
Oh, my God.
Under Captain Edward Edwards.
Oh, your daddy must have hated you.
No, that's a strong name. A man so nice they named him twice.
Oh, my God. Shut up.
So the mutineers must have thought they had come to find out what happened to the Bounty after it didn't return to Britain.
No.
Right?
No.
But that isn't what happened.
Uh-huh.
Edward Edwards stepped onto the island and said, "You boys are under arrest." And they must have thought, "What do you mean? What do you know? What have you heard?" And my headcanon is that Edwards opened a letter and read out loud, "I lived, bitch. Signed, Lieutenant William Bligh.
Oh my God.
Uh-huh.
I bet you thought you'd seen the last of me.
Uh-huh.
Oh my God.
In the most shocking twist in cinematic history,
Oh my God. I lived big.
before cinema was invented, Bligh had survived.
We're making a t-shirt, by the way.
Being
As much as
left-
I hate Bly, we're making a t-shirt.
He survived being left in the open ocean on a small launch with 18 other men with only 5 days' rations.
That's insane.
But how?
Cannibalism.
Well, after they left the Bounty, Bligh decided to sail towards the nearby island of Tofua, hoping to find water and food. And then he could travel on to other islands that he was familiar with and hopscotch his way back to the Dutch East Indies, where he could get passage back to England.
Mm-hmm.
But the native population of Tofua was not friendly.
Right.
And Bligh knew that not long after their landing, they were going to be attacked.
Mm-hmm.
So he gathered his men and supplies into the boat to depart. But the natives had grabbed hold of the rope,
Uh-oh.
preventing them from leaving. And the quartermaster, John Norton, actually leapt into the water to free the launch, and they got him.
Oh, no.
And they killed him.
Oh, John.
So the launch did manage to escape to sea, and Bligh feared that they could encounter such hostility at any island they stopped at, even the ones that he was familiar with. You don't know how you're going to be welcomed, right?
Sure.
Because you're invading privacy, essentially.
Uh-huh. You're there to take their resources.
You're there to take resources, and they had nothing to offer. Like, here's many gifts.
Yeah, we're not trading. We're just taking.
Yeah, so he had the insane idea that they should sail directly to the island Timor in modern-day Indonesia without any stops.
Whoa.
This was a 3,500 nautical mile journey with barely any food or water and no protection from the elements.
Oh, God.
But
have you ever seen that movie Open Water?
I don't know.
Okay, well, first of all, I don't necessarily recommend it, but I've seen it a bunch of times. But if you guys have ever seen the movie Open Water, like, that's the only thing I can think about in this kind of situation. And, like, I am pissed scared because that lady started drinking the seawater and went crazy. And you've never seen chapped lips like that in your life. Their skin was pruning up. It was disgusting. This is horrifying.
Yeah. Just like that movie.
Yeah.
But that's what they all decided. They all agreed to do just that. So for the next 48 days,
No.
Bligh's crew sailed west, relying on his navigational skills, using only the couple of tools that they left him and the stars.
Aww.
They were reduced to an ounce of bread and half a cup of water a day.
That's not
much.
That's not good.
They faced storms and the burning sun with full exposure.
Open water.
And tensions grew high, obviously. And at least once, Bligh threatened to kill a man with a cutlass after a heated argument.
He's got to learn to chill out.
I don't know what the guy did, but it was bad enough that he had to say, I'll kill you.
He probably ate 2 ounces of bread.
Maybe. But against all odds, they landed at Kupang Harbor in Timor on June 14th.
That is insane.
Bligh had not lost a single man after leaving Tofua.
I'm sorry. That defies all reason.
It's pretty insane, right?
Maybe he just lied about the number that he left with.
I mean, I think it would have come out. He returned to Britain in March of 1790 as a hero.
Sure.
And the news of the mutiny was everywhere. He was acquitted of responsibility for the loss of the Bounty and received a promotion. And then that November, Britain sent the Pandora to capture the mutineers and bring them back to stand trial. And that's when he showed the letter.
Uh-huh.
Edwards was able to capture all of the surviving mutineers on Tahiti. And then he went after Christian. He was going to find the rest of them.
Oh, well.
But it was going to be difficult because they could be in any of these islands, right? So he went out and looked at these islands, and he actually did sail to Pitcairn Island. But as you may remember, it was not well documented where it was, and the charts marked the wrong location of it. So he could not find it. But if their charts were correct, he would have found them.
That's lucky.
That is very lucky. So in August 1791, the Pandora, just before this, they had decided to head back. But on this date, they struck the Great Barrier Reef and began to sink, with the mutineers still chained up in a specially constructed prison called Pandora's Box.
Oh, stop. You can't call it that.
He did.
Guys.
Edward Edwards thought he was really cute.
He rocked up with a letter that said, "I lived, bitch." So of course he thought, like, I'm calling this Pandora's Box. Yes.
He sure did.
Oh.
So Pandora's armorer is reported as saving as many as he could, like unlocking their chains and everything, but 4 drowned, along with 31 members of the crew. The survivors, including 10 prisoners, actually sailed a similar course to Bly's, back to Kupang Harbor. And you got to imagine at that harbor, they're like, oh my God, again. And the mutineers were returned to Britain to stand trial. 3 of the surviving prisoners were actually those who had been loyal to Bligh. And Bligh had said, if you come back, if I survive, I'll do you justice, which you would assume meant if they came back to Britain and were like facing trial, Bligh would be like, I know these men are good. You must acquit them. But ironically, Bligh was not in London at the time of the arrival.
This motherfucker.
Or the trials. He was gone. He was on a voyage. He was leading a voyage to Tahiti to collect breadfruit plants.
I hate him.
Yeah. Again.
I hate him. I'm just going to be I'm done. I'm not making the shirts anymore.
But this time, he was a captain commanding a proper vessel with Marines.
Yeah, I would hope he would not go out by himself again.
And I hope that he said, you know what, let's just cut that dancing out. That didn't work out so well.
Your fingernails are your business.
Yeah, and that voyage actually turned out to be successful. Well, thankfully for them, those 3. So thankfully for them, those 3 men were acquitted, and over the course of several months, a few others received pardons or stays, but 3 men were hanged on October 28th.
Ooh.
And the public suspicion was that those who were acquitted or pardoned had the money or connections to do so, whereas those who were hanged had neither.
Yeah.
Little changes with time.
Sure.
The mutiny on the Bounty is the most famous mutiny in history.
That does explain why I've heard of it.
Yes. And has been recounted in books and movies. And the perception of Bligh and Christian has altered with every retell, and it changes. Sometimes Bligh is portrayed as a power-hungry, paranoid tyrant. And other times he's viewed as a leader forced to heavy his hand to protect the authority lest all hell breaks loose, which turns out did happen. Sometimes Christian is viewed as a young, disillusioned man who lost his mind after months at sea, harassment of his superior, and losing the woman he had fallen in love with. And other times he's viewed as a violent traitor who exploited others for his own selfish gain and suffered for it in the end.
I think probably all of those things are true about both of them.
It might be.
Yeah.
But I think we should wrap this whole thing up in a bow.
Is it Muppet Treasure Island?
Nah.
Oh, man.
There's no treasure in this.
Well, but there is Miss Piggy. It's just the treasure that's missing.
Right. This episode started with the British wanting to introduce breadfruit to the West Indies as a nutritious and cheap food product for slaves. And after everything we discussed transpired, they finally accomplished this. And the slaves found that it tasted like shit.
God. That's really awful. That's really like sad and brutal. That being said.
That being said, thank you so much for listening to this episode. Please check us out on YouTube and TikTok at Fantastic History Podcast and Instagram and Threads at Fantastic H Pod. If you liked this episode, please rate and review us. 5 stars would be cool, but we take whatever you got. Just be honest. And if you want to send us any recommendations of topics that you'd like to hear, or you got any feedback, our email address is fantastichistorypod@gmail.com. Until next week.